the Devar Torah that we have today is when to be sad and when to be strong. I wanted to sort of present to you an interesting dichotomy in the way that Moshe Rabbeinu reacts in seemingly contradictory ways when the Jewish people are displaying bad behavior. The Jewish people, sadly, sin with the golden calf in this week's Parsha, in Parshas Tisa. And we find conflicting views in how Moshe Rabbeinu is supposed to react when the Jewish people behave badly. The one representation, or one way that that Chazal present Moshe Rabbeinu, and really the Psukim themselves present Moshe Rabbeinu, is fighting ferociously for the sake of the Jewish people. So the way that, we just have to read the text of this week's Parsha, and we see how committed Moshe Rabbeinu is to the salvation of the Jewish people, that he fasts 40 days and 40 nights, and he prays to Hashem for 40 days and 40 nights, and he will not let go until he finally gets a reprieve for the Jewish people, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgives them to whatever degree that Hashem is capable of forgiving us for such an egregious sin. It's not to say that we were completely forgiven for the Chet HaEgel, because Chazal say that every generation has some remnant of the Chet HaEgel lingering, but to whatever degree that we were capable of being forgiven, HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave us because of Moshe Rabbeinu's prayers. There is a pasuk in Parshas Ekev that says that Vo'espos b'shnei haluchos va'ashlichem al shtei yadai va'ashaberim la'inechem. That Moshe Rabbeinu, in relating the story of how he broke the luchos in this week's Parsha, says that I took hold of the two tablets and I thrust them from my two hands and I broke them before your eyes. The difficult part of this pasuk is the very first word, Vo'espos. I took hold of the two tablets. Now, if you're holding two tablets, you're walking down the mountain, yes, and you've got these two huge tablets. You're Charlton Heston, and you're walking down, right? And you've got the two tablets, right? And what does it mean that you take hold of the two tablets? How do you take hold of something that you're already holding on to? So this is the part that is difficult for the Gemara to understand. So now we'll take a look at a section of the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, and see what the Gemara Yerushalmi says. He says, Rabbi Shmuel, and this is source number 2, Rabbi Shmuel bar, and it's from Maseches Tainis, Perek Dalet, Halacha Hey. It says, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman b'shem Rabbi Yonasan, he said as follows, this rabbi, he said, Haluchos hayu arkan shisha tifachim v'rachban shalosha. That the luchos were 6 tefachs, 6 handbreadths long, and they were 3 tefachs wide. V'haya Moshe tafis b'tefachayim v'hakadosh baruch hu b'tefachayim. That there was like a tug of war that was going on between Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem. That Hashem was holding on to 2 tefachs of the luchos. Moshe was holding on to 2 tefachs of the luchos, and there were 2 tefachim in between that sort of were neither one was holding on to. And Kevin Shasu Yisrael Osa Maisa Bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'chotvan Miyado Shel Moshe. That once the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf, God was about to grab them from Moshe's hand. He says, listen, give those things back to me, right? The Gavri Yado Shel Moshe V'chotvan Mimenu. But Moshe instead grabbed them from Hashem. He says, no, Hashem, I'm not letting go. I'm not going to let go of these luchos. And obviously you know that that's what the Gemara is addressing is why say Vo'espos. That Moshe says, I took hold. Because he was in a tug of war with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he says, I'm not letting go, and I'm not going to release them to you. I'm going to take them from you. And that's when Moshe says, I grabbed the 2 luchos, and then I broke them. And V'husha HaKosov Mishabcho B'sofa Omer, and that's why the Torah, at the very end of the Torah, in Parshas V'zos HaBracha, praises Moshe. And it says, U'lechol hayad hachazaka. And it talks about the great strength that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to demonstrate. So, Ye Shalma al Yada de Gavras alei minoi. And what God was basically saying is, peace upon the hands that were able to overpower me, says Hashem. That I give you a big Yishar Koach Moshe, that you were able to overpower me and you were able to take the luchos from me. So what you see from here is, and by the way, the question you could obviously ask is, if Moshe was so intent on grabbing the luchos from Hashem, but if his whole objective was to break them afterwards, why not just give them up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the first place? Right? If you know you're going to take them in order to break them because you know the Jewish people have sinned, so then what's the point? What's the point in grabbing them in the first place?
He'll have still received them. He'll have still had them in his possession.
Yeah.
So he sort of can get them again, possession is 9/10 of the law.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. What you're raising is sort of the way I think that some of the Meforshim would understand what this Gemara is saying. The letters that were used for the second set of luchos were the very same letters that were part of the first luchos. The Medrash describes how when Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos, the letters flew off. The letters flew off so that by the time he broke the luchos, it was just blank stone. Because of course the letters could never be desecrated. And so where did those letters go? HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the letters back and stored them in order to be able to use them for the second set of luchos. And the point therefore is that Moshe Rabbeinu said, we're not letting go of the Torah. We need to hold on to the Torah. If Moshe Rabbeinu had relinquished it, then we might have lost the letters permanently. But it's also important, perhaps, as a lesson for the Jewish people, better that we should break the luchos ourselves when we have sinned, than relinquishing it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and letting HaKadosh Baruch Hu do the dirty work. When we know that we've sinned, we have to take responsibility for it, and that's really what Moshe Rabbeinu was sort of modeling for the Jewish people. No, Hashem, we've done the sin, we've got to rectify it. So he then goes ahead and breaks the luchos himself. It's not for you to break. We messed up. We're going to have to rectify it ourselves. But I think there's something else that needs to be analyzed in the context of this discussion, and that is that you see that when the time comes, when the Jewish people have behaved terribly and have betrayed Hashem, then what is the role of Moshe Rabbeinu? It's to literally struggle with Hashem and to fight with God and pull those luchos back and save them for the Jewish people for the future. And yet, you find that in other places, when the Jewish people behave badly, Moshe Rabbeinu almost seems to be defeated, and he can't move any further. Now, we're just going to give one example of this kind of dichotomy, where sometimes Moshe Rabbeinu is the great defender and fighter and is strengthened and is galvanized to act because of the bad behavior of the Jewish people. And at other times, we see that he's deflated and defeated as a result of the Jewish people's sin. If you take a look at what we read in Parshas Yisro, we know that the Jewish people yelled at Moshe Rabbeinu after hearing the first two commandments. At least this is according to the way Chazal presented. After the first two commandments were given to the Jewish people, they said, we can't take this anymore. Karav ata ushama, as it says, it's recorded in Parshas Vo'eschanan, as Moshe was relating this history of the Jewish people, he said that Moshe Rabbeinu says, you told me, Karav ata ushama ischal asher yomar Hashem Elokeinu. You, Moshe, have to come close and listen to all that God will say. Va'at tedaber eleinu, and you tell us, Eis kol asher yedaber Hashem Elokeinu alecha v'shemanu v'yosinu. You tell us everything that Hashem has told you. We'll listen from you. We don't want to listen from God. It's too intense. It's too overpowering. Chazal say that when the Jewish people heard the first commandment, their souls departed from them. They couldn't endure this very, very visceral exposure to raw godliness. It just was too overpowering to the senses and to their spiritual fiber. Their soul sort of jumped out of them and wanted to cleave unto God. The human being was not capable of experiencing those kinds of experiences and surviving. The only exception, of course, was Moshe Rabbeinu himself. And so they said, Moshe, we can't keep doing this. We won't survive. We won't last for another 8 commandments. You better take over. And so the way that Moshe Rabbeinu describes it is that you said to me, Va'at tedaber eleinu. Va'at is a strange word, because really what the word should have been is what? Is Moshe a male or a female? He's a male, so they should have said Ve'ata tedaber eleinu. So this is a famous medrash that Rashi quotes over here, and it says Ve'at tedaber eleinu, source number 5. Hitashtem et kochi kanekeva. You weakened me like a female. In other words, the reason why, no offense here, no offense, right? But the point is that I lost my strength. I lost my strength completely when you told me that you, Moshe, you listen to Hashem. We can't take this anymore. Why? Shenitzta'arti aleichem, or ifitem et yadai. He says, I had so much pain when you told me that you didn't want to listen to, you couldn't listen to Hashem anymore, that you literally weakened me. You made me incapable of functioning further as the strong leader that I was supposed to be. Ki ra'iti she'enchem charedim lihitkarev elav me'ahava. Because I saw that you didn't have that sense of passion to want to approach God out of love and really to cleave unto God out of love. It was too frightening for you, it was too intense for you, and you weren't willing to take that risk and that leap that Hashem really was offering to you to submit yourselves completely to Hashem out of love. It would have been much better if you had learned the Torah from Hashem directly and not having me to act as the intermediary between you and God. That would have been so much better, says Moshe. You would have learned you would have absorbed the Torah so much more. The Torah would have been unforgettable to you. And yet now that you've asked me to transmit the Torah to you, it's going to be subject to all of these kinds of compromises and deteriorations that are going to happen to the Torah over the course of the history of the Jewish people. And so my observation is simply this. You see that sometimes Moshe Rabbeinu strengthens himself when it comes to fighting for the Jewish people. And sometimes Moshe Rabbeinu is weakened because of the bad behavior of the Jewish people. So when is he weakened and when is he strengthened? Now, there are a number of ways that, there are clear distinctions between these two, but I want to just be able to take out a lesson that we can all learn as parents from this whole story, because Moshe Rabbeinu was really the parent of the Jewish people. Just to give you an illustration, your child comes home and brings a report card with a couple of D's on it. That's the time when you're supposed to say to your child, "Hitashtem et kochi kanekeva." Oy, oy, you got a couple of D's. I feel totally weakened as a parent. You've disappointed me terribly. And of course, that's the guilt that we're supposed to give to our children. I'm so disappointed, and things are not going well. And then of course, when you get a call, "Mom, I just crashed the car, I've been in a terrible accident," then this is not the time to say, "I'm so disappointed that you were texting while you were driving, or that you were on the phone, or whatever you were doing." That's not the time to lecture your child. This is the time when you have to be galvanized to action. Tell me what happened. And then you have to you get this adrenaline rush. What am I going to do to save my child, right? And so there's a time to show disappointment, and there's a time to sort of say, "Thank God, my child is not in any mortal danger, but they are capable of so much more, and they have disappointed me because they could have displayed greatness, and they've only displayed mediocrity, or less than mediocrity." So that's when you become deflated as a parent. But when your child is in mortal danger, that's when the adrenaline says, "I'm going to lift up cars in order to save my child." And that's the difference between a Moshe Rabbeinu, when he sees the Jewish people are in mortal danger of losing everything that they had built themselves up to with Yetzias Mitzrayim, with this one foolish act of worshiping an Egel. That's when he has to say, "I don't have time to worry about my sense of pride and my disappointment in the Jewish people." That's where I have to go, and I have to say, "I'm not letting go of these luchos. I have to save my children." And verses where he says, "You've weakened me and you've deflated me." And we have to know when to apply the right ones. Sometimes a child presents symptoms of mortal danger, and we don't see those symptoms. A child may be crying out for help by acting out in certain ways. And sometimes the D that he's getting on his report card may be really just a manifestation of something that is actually something that could potentially be mortally dangerous. If you see a child that's usually getting A's and all of a sudden they're getting D's, then it's not necessarily the time to say how disappointed you are in the child. You have to really find out maybe there is something wrong, and you can leave no stone unturned until you discover the reason. So we as parents, sometimes we don't always have the right wisdom. I know I can only speak for myself to tell you that sometimes it's difficult to know when you're supposed to be weakened by your child and when you're supposed to be galvanized to great strength on behalf of your child. But Hashem should give us the wisdom to know when we're supposed to exercise the strength and when we're supposed to manifest the weakness that comes through our disappointments.